reverse engineering malware, developing like sandboxing technology. So yeah, I just spend my time researching malware and doing what we could across the network, across email, across binary analysis. Basically, those are the type of capabilities we had to help our customers stay safe. And now, obviously, now kind of on the dark side, as I like to call it now, on the sales side.
Welcome to Altar of the Demo Gods. If you're wondering what advice from two experienced sales engineers sounds like, it's a little like this.
Welcome back to Altar of the Demo Gods. I'm Keith Wilson, joined by my co-host, John Morton. John, how you doing tonight?
Ahoy, hoy, Keith.
Ahoy, hoy, John. I'm feeling refreshed because we didn't record last week, and I just came back from a trip to Chicago, so I'm feeling good. How are you feeling?
Chicago in the humid heat. Was it hot?
No, actually, it's starting to cool down there, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah, it is nice when the fall comes. There are places that are nice when the fall comes. So I'm feeling refreshed because Colorado fall is about all of 2.5, maybe 3 days. So I got a taste of it.
Yeah. So for tonight's guest, we brought on a friend of mine, someone who was actually my boss for a little bit. He is the VP of Worldwide Sales Engineering at Attack IQ, Jose Barajas. Jose, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, guys. Apparently, it's way hotter in San Diego because it's been like 100 degrees here, which is unheard of. So apparently,
Yeah.
Chicago sounds nice.
Chicago was nice, but I mean Georgia. So I live in Georgia,
Right.
and Georgia's we're suffering through the misery too. It hasn't been in the hundreds since probably August, but
Sure.
it's like the low 90s, high 80s, so it's still pretty warm. We
Yeah.
haven't really got the fall temperatures yet, and that's
Yeah,
been
100 in
weather
in
talk.
San Diego is
Yeah.
crazy, man. That is
Yeah.
I used to go there a lot to deal with different companies. I've seen so many baseball games at Petco Park, and
There you go.
that weather is what you live there for. So 100 is just
Yeah,
ouch.
it's been pretty nuts this week. Luckily, I fixed my AC last week before this hit, so I'm all good. I'm indoors and I'm happy.
There
Yeah,
you
you
go.
guys don't necessarily need the AC that often, so it's good that
No,
you
I
got
normally
you got
don't.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wanted to have Jose on the show because I think he's got a really interesting career story and career transition story. So before you were VP of sales engineering, you were sales engineer, and before you were that, you were a security researcher, right?
I, I was, yeah. So my background is coming from, reverse engineering malware, developing like sandboxing technology. So yeah, I just spend my time researching malware and, doing what we could across, the network, across email, across binary analysis. Basically, those are the type of capabilities we had to help our customers stay safe. And now, obviously, now kind of on the dark side, as I like to call it now, on the sales side, it's been an interesting journey to get here. So,
Yeah, well, so you were at one company where you were doing that, and because of your work at that company, the founder or one of the co-founders of where you work now knew you, right? So you had a pre-existing relationship with Stefan, one of the co-founders.
I actually didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
So I definitely knew of Stefan, and I knew of the founders at the company, but I never interacted with them. I never actually worked with them directly, even though I ended up in what was called the security labs, and where he was. What ended up happening is someone I worked with there worked with him in the past and was actually the one that pinged was like, hey, by the way, I know this guy is doing this thing. I think it'd be interesting for you, and that's actually how I got pulled in to first doing work with these guys and doing what I do here at Attack IQ now.
Well,
So
So
hopefully whoever that person was, you gave him a decent thank you because it seems like it worked out, right?
oh, absolutely, yeah, no, it's been great. I really enjoy what I do now. It's really interesting, and yeah, I'll still we'll meet up for lunch, and I'll get him Chick-fil-A sometimes. And,
There you go. That's awesome, man. So me and Keith, we talk about that a lot, and I always say it, and I heard somebody repeat it to me the other day. Your network is your net worth, And it's important.
Yeah.
It's important to like our listeners hear that, because it's even the in passing people you meet. Like, I don't think you went out and asked this person, "Hey, can you hook me up?" They just
Yeah.
did it because they knew you and they thought you were a great guy, right? So it seems like kind of just a natural way
Yeah.
it unfolded.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, given my history, definitely, I think those relationships matter. So you should always, especially early on in your career, do your best to make a great impression. The only reason I
Mm.
made it to the security labs is actually I was doing really well originally just categorizing websites. I would come in, categorize websites. I speak Spanish fluently, so Spanish websites, and they pulled me into a role called the web analyst, which basically was tech support for cybersecurity type of questions. So that's how I eventually then jumped to the security labs directly. But to your point, it really matters the impression you live on people, the relationship you build with people, because that person was like, "Hey, this job just came out. I had no idea about it. You need to take it." Or in this case, he
Wow.
said, "Hey, this guy I know, he could benefit from you working with him. I think you'd like it." And if I hadn't worked well with these people, haven't built the relationships, then they never would have thought of me, right, in those kind of
Right. They wouldn't
situations.
even
So
remember. That's
yeah,
awesome, man. That's a great story. I love it.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. He wouldn't have known you and your personality well enough to know that that was a good fit, and it obviously was a good fit. And so
yeah.
when you came over to Attack IQ, did you come over as a sales engineer? Is that what you came on as, or were you doing some of the security research work, but kind of incorporating it into what Attack IQ was doing?
Yeah, so initially came over. I was, reverse engineering the latest malware. I'm in the communities to understand what the current threat landscape was. So naturally, I can come over and say, well, I understand how that thing works. I can now recreate it. So I started with just building the attacks, and as my career developed, I don't know if that's the right word for it, but at Attack IQ, it went from just doing that to some code to actually build the application and contribute a little bit there, not as much as some of the other guys, but a little bit, and to then starting to lead teams that built these attacks, to even building out the networking infrastructure and the server rack, just like I described to you guys before on the call. I'm building a kind of my lab right now. I built an actual full rack with our servers.
I remember
Before we
that
had
rack
everything in
too.
AWS, yeah, like I did everything, right, and then eventually got pulled into the SE role, and then really got to slowly drop those things off, as the company grew. Because when it's like 8 of you guys, someone needs to do that. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
so
needed
yeah,
the sales engineer was just in addition to what you were already doing at the time.
absolutely, absolutely. And the sales in your part, I didn't know, like, hey, these people are interested in our product. I need you to explain it to them, right? So that's how it started, and really just kind of was pulled in that way. And this is before we had a proper sales team and proper experienced sales executive. So this was us just trying to figure it out. And eventually, when that executive showed up at the company, they kind of saw I was very technical. Obviously, I have that background, but I also could speak well.
Right.
So that was really really valuable too. And something else I'll
Fluent
share.
Spanish Fluent
Yeah,
Spanish has to be a nice bonus too.
Yeah.
I was actually going to say, so a big reason why I even feel comfortable speaking and all that is, I actually got really lucky. I was going to say, for those of you that know a language, whether it's Spanish or something else, like, don't hide it. It's an asset. Like, basically, marketing at my last company was looking for someone in the security labs to go give talks in Mexico, Colombia, and other parts in South America. And guess who was the only researcher that actually was fluent in Spanish? I was. So that gave
Yeah.
me an opportunity to go there, and I think for 3 to 5 years, I was flying down to Mexico City to South America to give talks. So definitely, I think that language is super important, and then also just it's just another way for you to make a connection with other people. Even people that speak French and Portuguese, they're not the same language. Don't get me wrong there, but just having that extra language helps you connect with people, and obviously in our roles, every way that we can connect with someone, the more that they're going to trust us and listen to us, right? And we start to build that relationship with them. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
super
can tell
important.
you, like, I don't speak another language, but I look like I should. So I was down in Aguas Caliente.
John, you took the words out of my mouth. I was gonna say the same thing, but I was like, no, it's racist if I say
Well, I'm gonna
it.
say it. And, and
Yeah.
and I was in Aguas Caliente, Mexico, right in the center. Most people don't know. And it was like the Feria San Marco, right in February, and everyone's looking at me and they're like expecting me to speak Spanish, and I
Yeah.
only speak English. So yeah, to your point, Jose, if you do have that superpower, use it to your advantage in every way, because yeah, it just bridges that bond, right? Or make
Yeah.
it bridges that gap, and you create a bond with people, and you're showing them just different paths. So yeah, man, good for you,
Yeah.
good for you, because I
Yeah.
suffer on the other side. So here we are.
There you go. And as an SC too, I mean, when we have a customer that only speaks Spanish, like I've had guys on my team that speak Spanish, so they take it on, and that's one deal that you just got on your plate that wasn't even your territory, but because you can cover it, because it's a language, you just got another deal to help
There you
get you
go.
closer to closing, your goal for the year. So there's also those direct monetary benefits that I've seen with my guys that speak Spanish too, because no one else can help them out, right? They just don't
That
speak
is
our
awesome.
language in
Yeah.
English.
See, now you know the real reason I started Duolingo, John. So I can pick up the extra cash.
Get some money, get some deals.
So, Jose, you were doing you were kind of slowly transitioning into a sales engineer role. As the company adjusted and you were giving up the other things, and the company started bringing in more seasoned sales executives and stuff like that, and the sales process became more formalized. How did you have to shift? What adjustments did you have to make? Because it's almost as like, we're describing this, but this really happened over the period of what, maybe 1 or 2 years? Like, it was a
Yeah,
pretty
it
quick
was pretty quick
transition.
early on. Yeah,
So the adjustments that you've had to make along the way, and we've said, I think we've made this reference at work a lot of the times, building the airplane as it's going down the runway, right?
sure.
And you almost get put in positions sometimes where you have to do that, and that's kind of what you did. So I was wondering if you could share with some of the listeners, some of the folks that are more technical that are considering transitioning to an SE path. Maybe they're wondering what some of the things to look out for were. So, what were some of the adjustments you had to make while you were doing this?
Yeah, I think for me, one big thing was learning from other folks, right? So as we hired more experienced sales folks, I think Greg, right, that was with us for a long time.
Coach
For
Greg.
example, I learned Coach Greg. I learned so much from him, right? And he's, obviously I have the technical chops, and he let me kind of handle that. But early on, he really told me, hey, we should be doing it this way. This is the process that I want you to run. So I think for one, as you're working with your account executive, definitely build that partnership with them. Especially if you're junior, don't be afraid to ask them. How do you want me to run this? This POC. What are things I should be thinking about? What are things that I should be asking from a technical perspective to help you? With the executives that you're talking to try to get funding for these things. So I think really, I told you, Keith, when you're coming on board, is the account executive is your partner here, and that's how we see that relationship, right? I think definitely go with that. Two, I think keeping a very very strict kind of rigid process on your side, right, to support your customers. I think our process for developing a POC. We've been very successful. Every time we get an at bat, there's a high chance that we're going to win. And that's because just establishing processes that work, being responsive to your customers. I think that's a third one. We built the concept of a cyber range. I joke that banks will take 18 months to spin up one VM, right? So we adjusted and said, what if I let you test in this cyber range? I had that range because I just build labs and test stuff, because that's how I
Right. You
build
you
stuff and
saw
do stuff. Yep.
you saw an obstacle to the sales process, which is we can't do a POC. It's going to take us 9 months to get approval to put that in place. So you saw an obstacle and met it with a technical workaround. And that
Yeah.
was,
Yep.
okay, we'll give you the testing environment and we can prove the product works there. We'll make it just like your environment or very similar to your environment and make it work there. And that,
Yep.
I know we're kind of veering from our main topic here, but that is a great idea, right? You have the opportunity to grow, and this is why I love startups, because you get to do so many things. You get the opportunity to grow and build that process, and you were talking about building that process, and I watched that process go and change too, right? The
Mm-hmm.
company changed, that demo process changed, that POV process changed. As you learn more about sales, as we collectively learn more about our customers, that process changed and refined. As hit a roadblock like, well, it's taking these customers forever to even want to do a POC, and it's killing deals because it's stalling them for so long,
Yeah.
and it gets refined. And um, now, obviously, you're not coming up with those solutions on your own, but you drove a lot of those projects. Do you think how is that to adapt to? Because that's another aspect too. Is now you're starting to get in the realm of leadership. We haven't even got to the point where you've gotten VP yet or director or anything like that. But I think around here you're dipping your toe in director, or at least director level activities, right? Where you're defining programs and structures.
Yep.
How is that shift to make into like now project management, right? And
Yeah,
process
actually, as
management.
yeah, actually, as you walk me through that, if we back up a little bit, I think in
Okay.
terms of trying to get to this role, I actually did a few things. One, I mean, we live in the information age. I mean, there's so many things online. I mean, now there's a lot more. 10 years ago, there was very few resources, but there were some resources around sales engineering and what that looks like. I also wouldn't understand, how do you buy stuff. I never had to buy stuff as a consumer of these technologies, so I went out and tried to read a lot about that to kind of understand the other side. And then also I want to understand the sales process, right? How do you pitch to someone? How do you talk to them? The Challenger Sale is like one of my favorite books. It makes sense. And I think especially as a practitioner, when you know the work and you've done the work, like, don't hide behind that, right? That's super important, that you are there to provide solutions to your clients, right? And that's why there's a lot of solutions architects out there, because you're supposed to provide solutions, right? The other thing I did, and I highly recommend everyone that's listening to this do this, is join Toastmasters. So talking about the transition to management, I went to Toastmasters for two reasons. One is to develop my ability to talk well in front of other people. Two, I'm talking to a room of people that have zero knowledge of cybersecurity. So if I can explain it to them well and get them to understand, then I'm getting really good at pitching to the right person and their level of understanding. But three, most people don't get this, but Toastmasters is about public speaking and leadership. So I actually dive right into leadership. One of the things that I did is I became the officer for membership, which means I'm the one that had to talk to, sell to, and convince people to sign up for the club. So again, just putting my salesman skills to the test through the Toastmasters, while
Practicing
also learning.
persuasion, yeah.
Yep, but while also learning how to organize the meetings, how to have meetings, how to have run a board meeting, because I was president of the club at one point. So having that framework, the club has been around, that I was part of, I think now almost 90 years, and Toastmasters has been around for I think they just hit 100 years. So they've been doing this for a while. So it was
Yeah.
And
very
cheap
learned a
too.
lot. Yeah, it's like $100, $160 for the whole year
And
to
most
join the
companies will
membership.
reimburse you for it too.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you're at a big company, they probably have a Toastmasters club. So, anyways, those are the things that I did in preparation for now. Now I have to do the sales thing, right?
Yeah.
For me to get myself acquainted with it, learn about these things, and then also learn a little bit about leadership in Toastmasters, which I think a lot of people don't know that. But if you don't simply help with setting up the meetings, you'll learn a lot about what it takes to herd cats, right? That is part of our job a lot in sales,
Right.
right? And follow up.
What's
Yeah.
what's interesting, Jose, and I wanted to ask, kind of just double down on that exactly. And sounds pointed, but we want your opinion on this. I always say, in my experience, it's easier to teach someone to the technical aspects of selling versus teaching someone who's very technical to sell. So, case in point, we have technical people who are very happy building labs. They're comfortable. They're safe there. They don't want to come out of it. They don't want to
Yeah.
go to Toastmasters. It's almost harder for me to convince them and teach them how to sell versus someone who is maybe not as technical, but they are definitely more outgoing. For me to say, hey, if you can just focus on that selling ability a little bit more and less on the tech side, what's your kind of opinion on that? Like, it sounds like you had fun enjoying the labs, but you also had fun on the other side. What if you're like heavy on either side? Is there any advice for somebody there?
You
I know it's
know,
a
I
tough one, man, and I put you on the spot, but
yeah, that's an interesting
Go work at the
question.
smallest
I
startup you can find so you can do everything.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a thing, right? I think going this path at a very big company was very unlikely to happen. right? I mean, I think a lot of it was, I think for one, I told you I gave talks before, so that obviously helped me feel comfortable talking to people, which I think most technical people aren't comfortable with doing those things. So I think that
Yes.
helped.
So you
I
doubled
think
down
it's
on something you were confident about, you knew you had dominion
yeah.
over, you controlled.
But to
Okay, so
Keith's
that's a
point, we're
path.
very small, and they're like, someone, big company wants to talk to us. Who's available? And I'm the one that kind of just stepped up. So I think, I think there's a lot of being forced to do it a little bit. But
Yeah.
to answer your question directly now, I think it's definitely easier to probably teach someone that's motivated and is already outgoing a little bit of the technical than getting
Right.
someone very technical to get out of their shell. I say that
Okay.
because, public speaking is the number one fear people have ahead of death, right?
Right.
So from that perspective, it's very hard. And I have a lot of people that come to Toastmasters and they sit there and listen, but will never speak. They just
Right.
can't get over that. So I think just those are the things that come to my mind as I walk through that. I think it'd definitely be easier to get someone,
Yeah, no worries, man. And I
yeah, the
appreciate
other
you
way
winging
around.
it, right? Yeah, I put a lot of people in awkward situations, but because it makes everyone better, right? And to your
Yeah,
point, being uncomfortable is actually a good thing if you're not afraid of it. So even in that respect, thank you for that answer. And me and
It's
Keith deal with
usually an
this all the time.
indicator
So
of growth. Actually,
yeah.
yeah, I was
absolutely.
when we were just coming on the call, I was showing John one of my wacky drawings from a coaching session I was doing with one of the employees of the company today. Um, he was it's really the learning curve, and he was talking about uh, he's worried about having a tendency to start projects or start things and then kind of give up on them and start something new. And lots of people are like that. And it's the exact same reason they're afraid to do public speaking, and it's the learning curve. It's you start right here and you go, well, I don't know what I don't know. So that seems like okay, pretty cool. Let's go ahead and check out that new thing. You get up to the top here and you can see over the edge, and this is where you finally bottom out and you learn all the knowledge around the way, right? But you peek down the edge and you go, holy shit, that's a long drop.
Yeah.
And then you get scared, so you start over again instead of just doing the work, taking the ride, and then coming out on top. Generally, if somebody pushes themselves, they're afraid of public speaking and they haven't even tried it, haven't even taken any steps at all to try it. I've
Right.
seen people that come in because of Jose, I did Toastmasters. He suggested it to me, and I did it. And I saw people that would come in that were timid for the first meeting or two,
Mhm.
and then they would slowly come out of their shell, right? Because
That's
they
amazing.
they they would watch the exercise, and then they'd finally do one, and it was that tipping point where they're like, oh, this isn't scary, and then everything's fine. I've also got Tony Robbins on the brain because I've been reading it too. A lot of that is like limiting
Yeah.
beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you tell yourself, "Oh, I can't sell something," then you can't because that's what you've already determined. Or I can't speak publicly. How do you know? Try it
Right.
out. It's really not that bad. In
Yeah.
fact, it's kind of exciting.
Just if I was going to give $1 million tidbit based on this excellent conversation, I always come back to very simple things. Jose, we're learning, we're building a relationship here. Keith will tell you. I like to keep it simple, stupid. I was a sailor in the Navy. It sounds like the ability to communicate, no matter who you are, is exponentially valuable. Period.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Period.
Right? I
Absolutely.
mean, that ability, which we're talking about, whether in a small group, large group, just articulate some message is valuable.
Well, I mean, I forget. I wish I could quote it, but they said, let's pretend that you're the most brilliant person in the world. If you're unable to communicate that brilliance, and what is that worth, right? So I
Right.
think
Yeah.
I think absolutely, absolutely right. Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
I mean, what happens when you listen, talking about communicating brilliance, right? What happens when you listen to somebody that's constantly using big words to explain a concept? You're like, okay, either you really are smart or you're faking it with these big words, but either way, you lost me, so I don't care, right?
Right.
And if you apply that to sales, well, you lost me equates to you lost the sale.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if they scoff or snide, right? And it's even worse. There is ways to make that situation worse. But yeah, communicating in technical sales is the key to making money, for lack of a better term.
That's what it all
Absolutely.
comes back to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Jose, now we're moving into the VP role, and this is where
Sure.
you're overseeing more. And I remember talking to you during this time too, and you had to learn this new skill called hiring, right? Which
Yes.
is and I've had conversations with our leadership too, because it's things that I've been told is you got to learn how to hire the right people. And Jose actually gave me a really good book. If you remember the book, recommend it. If not, I'll try and go back and find it to put it in the show notes later.
I don't
Uh,
remember the book.
yeah, you recommended a book, but and I have it, so I'll
We'll
put
put
it
it
in
in
the
the
show notes.
notes.
We'll put it in the
Okay.
notes. What was that transition like for you? Because to me, that's still one of those skills, and now I'm asking selfish questions because it's one of those skills that I'm like, well, yeah, I need to work on that.
Yeah, it's definitely hard, right? It's I was lucky enough to have, I think good leadership that supported me. I think initially was, I don't think they were there to just kind of, well, I mean, I guess they were there to shout at me. It was my first time hiring people, but they would say, hey, you don't want to hire this person, and here's why, right? This is what I noticed, and this is what I need you to consider in other situations. So I think, if your leadership isn't kind of involved like that to help you out, I think don't hesitate to just ask them. Hey, I'm talking to this person. This is what I'm thinking about. These are the positives and the drawbacks. What's your analysis here? So I think definitely leaning on folks that have more experience on you has been super helpful for me, and they've supported me, especially my first few hires. Now, I mean, I've been doing this for quite a while now.
So you got
Now
the
if I
hang
bring
of it.
someone to the table, they're they typically not even bother to look because they know I have this going. I worked on it. So I think with anything, just be very cautious when you're first getting started. Try to talk to other folks that have experience and have done it before. I personally, I don't want to reinvent the wheel here, right? So if someone's done it already, let's try to learn from them and not make the same mistakes. But yeah, it's definitely hard. I mean, you have to pick someone that then, literally my paycheck is dependent on it, but also my reputation as a leader is dependent on it too. And then also, so are my current team members, right? Because if I hire someone that's an asshole, right? That's going to be bad for my entire team, not just my direct team, but other teams that we have to interact with. Talk about the reputation it could ruin at the customers, meaning it puts us in a situation where we might not be able to salvage that account. So um, yeah, I think my advice, just thinking early on, is early on. I thought I knew who the right person was, but I think don't jump just because it feels like the second person you're talking to is the right one. Like definitely take the time to see what's out there, and find the right person. And one thing that I found is definitely management and stuff will push you to hire someone. Businesses run in quarterly cycles and yearly cycles and budgets, which means, hey, if you don't get it done by this date, it's
You're
gone.
gonna lose that.
You
You're gonna lose that slot. Yeah.
you know what? Sometimes it might be better off, right, not to rush it and make a mistake than it is to say, you know what, now I have two hires instead of three, but those two people, are going to be amazing, and I would have made a mistake if I rushed. So I think that doesn't mean you can just talk to people and not pick anybody. At some point, you
Yeah, you
have to
can't
make a
drag your
choice.
feet. Yeah. Like
But you also don't rush just because everyone's pressuring you. Like I've had executive teams pressure me and say you have to hire someone quickly, and I've pushed back. Luckily at that point I
yeah.
had some experience to do that, but I think that's something else that I think is super important in the hiring process. And hire slow and fire fast. Right?
Yeah,
I
I
think
was gonna I was gonna
so.
echo that exact thing. And what's interesting about that, Jose, and you'll appreciate this, and I know Keith will too, is sellers have the best ability to sell you too. So in the
Yep,
interviewing process, the hardest hire you're gonna make is someone who has
absolutely.
sales acumen, without a
Yep,
doubt. They
yep,
know what to say. It's their job. So you got to
yep.
hire slow, fire fast. Yeah.
Yeah, and I learned that from some local, a CTO that I met through Attack IQ, and he's actually the nicest guy in the world, and the last person I'd expect to say that. But he followed up and said, like, look, people will think the fire fast is like you're harsh and whatever, but the reality is, if it's not working out, you're keeping them from other opportunities they could potentially have too. Right?
Exactly.
So it's not as harsh as it sounds. Especially if it's causing a problem for other team members, you can't have that, right? I think a big thing for leadership is If you see a problem, you have to recognize it and do something about it, because otherwise you're letting it fester, and the rest of the team is looking at you like, what, do you not see this? Are you not going to do something about it? And it's
Yeah,
just
to
going to
your
cause
point, it's a
further problems
reflection of
too. Right.
your
Yeah.
decision making and hiring ability, and they're like, "What is happening here, Jose?"
Yeah.
I
So
hear you.
there's all those, I kind of jump dynamics there, but those are the kind of things that I have to think about and consider, as we make these kind of decisions, I
Yeah,
guess.
no, I appreciate it,
Yeah.
and I think Keith asked that question. The evolution from geeking out in a technical cyber lab to now you have to make decisions on behalf of your organization. It's that growth, right? These things maybe you didn't expect, so highlighting those is appreciated. Thanks, Jose.
Yeah, and I think something else, just moving into this kind of higher level role, now that I have VP title, it means that VPs and C-level executives actually will take the time to talk to me, right? I just bring that up to say it's also super important to, again, you said good seller will sell, right? So you got to know who you're talking to. The appeal that we, especially coming from the technical side, is not going to be the same way that you appeal to the CTO or the
Right.
CIO or the CISO. So you got to be very, very considerate. At the same time, though, I'll run into those very technical CISOs, and then I'll just go all day long, really going into that, because they're techies just like me, just happen to
Yeah,
take this path. So you got to be good at recognizing that and having that's I think a major change I've seen too as I've grown, into my roles
that's
also that
awesome.
I want to
Yeah,
talk about.
exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is the bittersweet part of the show where we kind of summarize our final thoughts. I'll go first and give you guys time to kind of think about what you want to talk about. You just talk about one or two points that either you want to reiterate or maybe something you forgot to talk about that you think is important that people know. So I'll go first, then we'll let our guest Jose go, and then we'll close out with Mr. Morton.
Sure.
So it's very apparent, and John's gonna kill me for this because he's the one. I'm almost making his exact point. It's very apparent that communication is a huge skill that's needed to be successful as a sales engineer, right? If you can't communicate properly, you're going to end up losing deals. You're also not going to be able to get the promotions. If you're trying to move up the ladder like Jose did, it wasn't just his communication with customers, it was his communication with teammates, it was his communication across departments. Jose had a reputation across departments when I first showed up, right? Like people knew who he was, they knew what it was like to work with him. It was communication with executives and the willingness to learn too. And then the new one that we just brought up at the end here. So I've got a little bit of recency bias. The hire slow, fire fast. I hadn't heard that before, and it's an interesting concept, and it makes sense, right? Like you said, it does sound brutal, but it makes sense, right? If things just aren't, if you know for sure things aren't going to work out, why drag it out? And if it's something that's like obviously like a behavioral problem, well, chances are you don't even need to give any sort of performance training or anything like that. You can just go, okay, well, we're not here to solve your behavior problem. Somebody else can do that. Probably helps if you pay a
Yeah.
good salary too, because then you can afford to hire people and get people in like that as well. All right, Jose. So final points.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna double click on the speech thing. Shameless plug as a leader of a Toastmasters club, actually part of Club 7. It's the seventh ever made. Now there's like thousands of them. So go to a Toastmasters club. It's free. You don't even have to pay for the membership. If you just show up and hear people talk, you're gonna benefit a lot. To like John made a point, or I think it was you, maybe Keith, but you saw people there that were super timid, and just by listening, eventually participated in the I forget what it's called, but the short little 30-second talk that you give. That's a good way to grow, and so to definitely do that. The second one I think is definitely never stop learning. I think like right now, I've taken the time to learn all the cloud things. Right, before it was even relevant to me. Now we have cloud attacks. 6 years ago you could barely find what type of cloud attacks were out there, but I knew. So definitely do that. And I think one thing that I learned in my myself and like building labs and doing stuff, and when you start feeling uncomfortable and it starts feeling hard, like that's your signal to say I'm doing something that I've never done before, and maybe I need to walk away right now and come back tomorrow, but I need to figure this out because I know my mind is telling me this is too much, you can't do it. And
And you're usually
let's
almost
work
there
past that.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
exactly. No,
almost there usually.
yep, exactly, exactly. So you're closer than you thought you were.
Yep.
Right. I think I always find that too, for sure, Keith. So yeah, those are my two takes away. I think I'll share with you
Awesome.
quickly.
Thanks, Jose. Morton, what you got for me?
I got one, man. And I know everyone feels like they stole my thunder on this one, but I take so much pride when I learn something new. And I learned something new today that I'm adding to my repertoire, thanks to you, Jose. So, normally when I hire people, I look for people that I want to hang out with or get to know. I look for two traits: coachable and curious. But I think the third trait you reminded me of that's absolutely critical is consistent. Coachable, curious, and consistent people are just everything. So, yeah, if you're that kind of person and you demonstrate those factors and you have those attributes, that's value right there.
All right.
Agree.
Jose, thanks again for being on. If you enjoyed this week's episode of Alter the Demo Gods, please like, share, subscribe. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed. You can get us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're going, I don't know where to go for these podcast things, or podcasts, as I like to call them, you can go to demogodspod.com. We've got links to all of them right across the top bar. Plus, we've got blog posts in our most recent episode. We'll keep on there. Plus, links to all of our most recent episodes. If you think you'd be a good guest on Alter the Demo Gods or have a question for us, you can email us at demogodspod@gmail.com. That's demogodspod@gmail.com. Jose, again, thank you so much for being here. Listeners, thank you for being here. We'll see you next week on Alter of the Demo Gods.